Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. We have so much to talk about because right now, this country is really, I don't know how to even describe it, where we're following, or I should say, a big portion of this country is following Donald Trump like a cult leader. So I want to ask you this. Let me start with the very first question here. Given Trump's continued claims of a stolen 2020 election, something that his people constantly parrot, how did these assertions reinforce cult-like behavior amongst his most ardent supporters? Because we all know that the election was not stolen. It's been litigated, I think, in 60 different courts, give or take, but yet his cult-like most ardent supporters continue to sow this misinformation, disinformation, malinformation campaign.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, let me just say it's a pleasure to be on with you. You are one of the whistleblowers of the cult of Trump. I included you in my book, The Cult of Trump. So thank you for being you and being a stand-up guy. And what I want to say is that in my work, because I was in a mind control cult for 2.5 years back in the 70s and been studying it for all of these years, my worry is about authoritarian cults that do mind control, that create pseudo identities that are dependent and obedient on the cult leader. And so there are very specific behaviors that characterize a destructive cult leader. I like to use Erich Fromm's malignant narcissist frame, which he developed evaluating Hitler, I might add. And one of those things is pathological lying and thinking they're above the law and they're unto themselves. So there's that dimension of Donald Trump that I wanted to highlight. But what's missing in the media, Michael, and I listen, is that people don't understand there are tens of millions of Americans who are in cults, authoritarian cults themselves, where they're following who they believe is a prophet or an apostle who speaks to God, who speaks in tongues and casts out demons, and who they have to follow blindly, otherwise Satan and demons will invade them. It's these cult leaders that have indoctrinated their followers to believe that the election was stolen. And because God told them he won, you see? And in that mindset, it's us, God, against Satan. So everyone who isn't part of the Trump cult is Satan, particularly any critic, former member, especially. We rise to the top of the enemies list, if you will, which brings up your last book, Revenge, and what you firsthand experienced. Should Trump and MAGA get back into power, we know it's fascism, we know it's authoritarian dictatorship. So it's looking good right now, but I don't want to be overconfident. But what I want to say to you is that I think we need to change our messaging. I think we need to start, instead of just saying it's a cult of Trump, start amplifying former members of the cult, people who are now coming forward saying, I was wrong to trust him. I believe in God, or I believe in the real Jesus and not what he's preaching. We want to change the messaging so that all normal people or non-cult members don't look down on the people who are still trapped in the mind control bubble.
But people look down on them because they realize that so much of what he's saying that they are spewing and repeating and regurgitating over and over and over is really fucking stupid. I mean, it rises to a level beyond stupid. You know, it's 4 years just about post the November election of 2020. And they are still talking and bitching and belly aching about it. You know as well as I, there is no time machine. You're not going back in time. You're not going to create some sort of a time warp where you can jettison back to November of 2020 and figure out, even assuming that there was a microbe of reality to what he's talking about, which there is not.
Right.
How about worry about the upcoming election,
Right.
as opposed to just rehashing the same pathetic, inaccurate lies and gripes? Which then brings me to kind of like my next question for you on the same point.
Right.
So then,
can I just comment?
Of course,
can
you can.
Just to feedback. So I was a Moonie, and I frickin' fasted for Richard Nixon during Watergate because I was told by Sun Myung Moon God wanted Nixon to be president, and we should ignore all the illegal conspiracy and criminal activities. So I am fine with you saying to me, Steve, when you were a Moonie, you were frickin' stupid for agreeing to that.
I call myself stupid all the time for being
but that's
in
what
that
I'm trying.
Sure.
Right. So I'm trying to just understand, if people are listening to this now, to understand that we can act stupid. It doesn't mean as people we're bad people or that we don't have intelligence, because you're very bright. I think I'm pretty bright. And there's light in the end of the tunnel if they choose to leave.
But Stephen, most of the people that are part of the ardent Trump supporters, the real true diehard maggots, they are not intelligent people. In fact, not my words, but Donald's, he loves the poorly educated. He has managed to give them what they think is like a Trump University degree, where they have the ability to spew whatever comments that they either hear at the local watering hole, or that they or that they listen to on, whether it's an OAN, a Newsmax, or Fox, and they now believe that they are Harvard graduates.
Right, but let me pull that apart for a second and just say they're uneducated doesn't mean they're unintelligent. And there's millions of Americans who've been homeschooled, not in public school, where they're anti-science. They think there's no such thing as global climate warming. They think that Jesus is coming back again, is going to clean all of the problems.
But they're not who I'm talking about. Those are religious people. The climate deniers are, I do consider them to be foolish, certainly stupid.
They're brainwashed.
I mean, you see glaciers cracking apart in the North Pole, bigger than the size of Rhode Island. All right. And you got to wonder, when you have a scientist tell you, and you see what's going on in terms of the ferocity of the hurricanes and the violent storms that were experienced, on a regular basis. But listen, most of the people I'm talking about, I'm not saying if you're homeschooled means you're not intelligent. I mean, I read the book, Uneducated, brilliant woman, and so on. I am not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is the people who are supporting Trump, for the most part, if you see them being interviewed, their comments are, comical. Especially when you twist it around and you use Trump's own words, but say that was Joe Biden, or that this is Kamala Harris or Tim Walz who's saying it, and then they go ape shit ballistic on it. That's because he's a fascist, because he's a communist. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. That it was Joe Biden who said that. It was actually Donald Trump who said that. Well, that's because he's smart.
That's projection. But this is psyops, Michael. We are in psychological warfare mode, and people's brains have been hacked, and they're not coming back to common sense and who they were before they got hacked. And their family and friends could actually help them reality test. So I don't know. I'm sure there are some people who are stupid. that are followers. And I'm sure there's some people who are stupid that follow the Democrats. That's not the issue. The issue for me is people's minds and their beliefs are being hacked so that they're not reality testing with facts and science and trustworthy experts.
So, look, one of the things that Trump has mastered, and I think that's how he hacks into people's brains, it's the use of repetition and the use of slogans, bumper stickers, right?
Yep.
Such as "Make America Great Again," or, fake news, or "Lock her up," or, "Build that wall." Because what this does, this repetition and this slogan use, it mirrors indoctrination techniques that are used by other cult members throughout history and currently.
Exactly.
Talk to my listeners about that.
No, that's exactly right. And we now know that the brain, if you're hearing it over and over and over again, it starts to act as if it's true. And that's where we need critical thinking to step back and analyze what's the source of this information, what's their agenda, and does this sync with my own personal experience and people that I respect and trust. What I value with you, Michael, is you were inside the cult of Trump, inside of the corporation, and understand how it works. And
I was the second in command, third in command, right?
Exactly. My point.
Top 5.
But you're a model. You're an exemplar that there's life after cult, that you can be like, I'm so sorry. I realize I got taken up by the awe. I got taken up by the behavior, information, thought, and emotional control mechanisms, what I call the bite model of authoritarian control. But the human spirit, we don't want to be deceived. We don't want to be exploited. We don't want to hurt our family, our friends, or our country. And so what I'm trying to say to your listeners is that even the most fervent, crazy cult members can exit because they have an authentic self. They have a core that I believe can get free. And that's what we need. We need to go, in my mind, beyond the election to how are we going to depolarize and deprogram millions of people in the United States? And my answer is psychoeducation, teaching everybody that about social psychology. For example, in social psychology, there's a cognitive bias. It's called the fundamental attribution error. And tell me if I'm being too technical.
No, you're not.
But it's an error.
I have a very educated and a very smart listener base.
That's great. And I'm one of those. So the fundamental attribution error says around the world, when people try to understand other people's behavior, they overestimate their disposition, their personality, and they underestimate the context and the social influences. So why did Steve get in the Moonies? He was stupid. He was weak. He came from a bad family. He didn't have a religious education. Instead of Steve was an exceptionally smart kid whose girlfriend dumped him. Women flirted with him, lied to him, and he was sleep deprived and systematically socially indoctrinated with hypnosis to believe Moon was the Messiah and that the Holocaust was justified and that democracy is satanic and we have to infiltrate the government. I mean, that's what I believed as a Moonie. And I didn't have power, but I was in the room with Moon as he talked about these things 50 years ago. 5-0.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing today.
That's for sure.
And the Moonies are still active. They gave Trump $2.5 million to endorse them. And the Moonies Washington Times is the single biggest purveyor of climate science denial, according to David Lipsky's book, The Parrot and the Igloo. They're still players. The New York Times yesterday just came out with a front page article about Falun Gong, the Shenyang dancers and the Chinese cult. They have the Epoch Times, major propagandists for the cult of Trump, and QAnon.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to that afterward. But you know what's really interesting? Have you ever noticed Trump's portrayal of himself, where he constantly, again, repeats over and over again, it's the repetition, the slogan, and yada, yada, that he is the only person capable of saving America. Only he and he alone. The stock market's going to crash. Meanwhile, it's up like over 250 points just today. It's once again exceeded every number. Unemployment is at the lowest, but only Donald Trump can save America. My question to you, Stephen, is how do you think that this portrayal of himself contributes to the absolute ridiculous, deep loyalty, almost messianic, not almost, messianic devotion that we see in his followers?
No, I think you said it well. So the thing is that human beings, all of us normal people, we have uncertainties. We have anxieties over uncertainties. And when things are very disruptive, whether it's weather, the economy, political situations, when somebody shows up with certainty, there's an attractiveness to us. It almost appeals to a little child in us that wants daddy to tell us, I've got this. I know what to do. Just do whatever I tell you and everything's going to be fine. In other words, we're not thinking as adults. We're acting emotionally as children, following the daddy figure. And cult leaders know to do this. They know how to exploit this. But as people like forensic psychiatrist Bandy Lee, who edited The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump that came out, we know that this ego is so frail, so insecure, that it's overcompensated to blowing up to that he is, godlike. And I have many cult leaders say they're God, not just the Messiah, but God themselves.
Correct. It becomes almost comical when you hear, in 24 hours, he could resolve the Russia-Ukraine war. In 24 hours, he could put an end to Israel-Hamas war. In 24 hours, he could fix the economy, right? Even though he said actually in the first year, he would fix the entire economy. He would balance the budget. He would get rid of our deficit. In fact, he raised it by over $7 trillion. We already know that the promises that he makes, I can turn around and say, I want all of my listeners to not vote for anyone other than Michael Cohen. Why? Because I'm telling you that in 24 hours, I will ensure diversity, equality, inclusion. I will make sure that no child ever experiences hunger in America. Everybody in America is going to get a brand new car. The next. Why are you laughing? These are the things I'm promising. These are the things I'm promising. It's going to be unlimited open jobs that all jobs will pay a minimum of $100 per hour. All right. I'm going to reduce the cost of goods and services. All right. All within 24 hours I'm going to fix this immigration problem in 24 hours. All right. And I'm not even going to need a wall to build it. I've lost several very close and very dear friends over the course of my lifetime to drugs. I am going to, in 24 hours, put an end to the entire drug epidemic in this country. There will not be another pill coming, another fentanyl pill coming across.
I think you made your point.
All right. And all of a sudden, now I find myself the president of the United States of America, or at least with a whole slew, let's say 50 plus million people that turn around and say, holy shit, Michael Cohen's the man. None of these stuff are possible. No more than God created the earth in 24 hours. Donald Trump could.
So I believe, as I wrote in my book, that there's been an evolution of the understanding of mind control and hypnosis, and now through digital media and all of our data that's been hacked and AI. I believe that Putin is influencing him. Maybe Netanyahu's influencing. I believe that there are actual cults, whether they're extreme Ayn Rand's, selfishness is good and altruism is evil belief, libertarians, or whether they're Nazis, or whether they're New Apostolic Reformation, which I was mentioning before, where these self-proclaimed prophets and apostles claim that they're speaking to God. So I think it's these groups is what we should be paying attention to, because otherwise, without all of these groups of tens of millions of people, Donald Trump would be a nobody. He'd be in jail.
Yeah, it's very true. So then let me ask you this, because you brought up QAnon before. Can you do me a favor, elaborate for my listeners on how Trump leverages conspiracy theories like QAnon, all right, to deepen the commitment of his base and to marginalize dissent within that group?
Right. So first of all, do you remember Lyndon LaRouche, the guy who ran for president 8 times? So it turned out that he was a pal of Roger Stone and Russia, and he was a major conspiracy theorist. And so the idea is how to give some narrative to explain a phenomenon, but you do it with certainty. But it's all aimed in what's known as fourth generation psychological warfare, aimed at making people distrust experts, make them distrust science, and make them distrust democratic institutions. And so the idea is how to take a few nuggets of facts and spin it into a story where you're turning everything and projecting what actually he's doing and what Russia's doing onto everybody else. So it's a misdirection, it's a misattribution effect. But what I'm trying to convey is people buy into conspiracy theories when something's weird, they don't know what it is, and they're given a convincing narrative. However, one needs to use critical thinking, and one needs to say, what's the source? What is their agenda? What are they asking from me? And when it comes to QAnon, I have some information I'll share. One is I knew a guy who was one of the founding members of Anonymous, and I knew him because he took on Scientology. He got people to wear Guy Fawkes masks and protest Scientology around the world. His name is Greg Hausch, lives in Massachusetts. So he said, Greg, QAnon. And this is years ago, I asked him. He said, I know those 3 guys. They were goofing on the Trumpers.
If you're like me, you're constantly thinking about safety of the people and the things that are most important to you and that you value the most. I mean, after years ago, this happened to me and my family. We got robbed. We had a house upstate in New York. One day we showed up, right? It was a holiday and everything was gone. And I knew that we needed to secure the home with the best. And my research led me to Simply Safe. I've trusted Simply Safe to protect my home for years now. And the level of security and customer care has been absolutely incredible. So first of all, I sleep better every night knowing Simply Safe's 24/7 monitoring agents are standing by. They're standing by to protect me. And if someone tries to break in, and then I just send an emergency help when I would need it the most. So I want you to have the same peace of mind that I do and so many listeners experience every day, which is why I've partnered with Simply Safe to offer listeners, get a load of this, 20% off a system. And just simply visit simplysafe.com/mea culpa. And that's SIMPLISAFE.com/mea culpa. What I love most is that Simply Safe just keeps getting better. With exclusive LiveGuard protection, Simply Safe agents, they can act within 5 seconds. Get a load. 5 seconds of receiving your alarm, and they can even see and speak to intruders inside your home, warning them that the police are on their way. As a Simply Safe user, it's no surprise that Simply Safe has been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News and World Report for 5 years running, and the Best Customer Service in Home Security by Newsweek. Protect your home this summer with 20% off any new Simply Safe system when you sign up for Fast Protect monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/mea culpa. That's simplysafe.com/mea culpa. And that's SIMPLISAFE.com/mea culpa. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
And I went, goofing? He said, yeah. But then they realized they could make money selling merch.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, and then the Russians got involved. I was like, would you be willing to say this publicly? Can I interview you? He said, no, I don't want to say it publicly, but that's what happened. And we can track QAnon through Stuart Schulman is a scholar who has a company who can do data mining on Twitter, now known as X. We can go back to 2017 and actually track the first posts and who's saying what and do a whole. It was a psyop, and it was using alternate reality gaming principles with bakers and crumbs and got to figure it out.
Right. But, you talk about sort of the way I interpret what you're saying, these are like really psychological effects on these individuals. And what's causing these effects? And the answer, in my opinion, and I want to get yours because you are the expert in this, these individuals are consuming a very healthy diet of Trump-endorsed media outlets like Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, and so on, right? So my question to you then is, how does this impact these individuals, their perception of reality? Because I see them as being completely disassociated from reality.
Exactly. So my BITE model, BITE, the I is information control. And what I want to say to your listeners is that human beings have been around for tens of thousands of years in small little groups. Modern civilization is a relatively new invention, the industrialized age. But we have hardwiring to conform to other people we identify with, and we're hardwired to follow authority figures that we deem to be legitimate. And so I'm going to teach a little bit. I'm going to cite 2 social psychology experiments quickly for your listeners. The Asch Conformity Study, Solomon Asch, ASCH, and you can look it up on YouTube and learn about it, or the Milgram Obedience Study. And what Asch did, Michael, was he put people in a room, said it was a visual perception experiment. The experimenter would hold up a placard with 4 lines on it, a sample line and 3 lines of differing sizes. They go around the room. Which of the 3 is the same size as the sample line? Mm-hmm. Except everybody was in on the experiment except the person in seat 6. The experiment demonstrated that 2/3 of everybody doing this experiment start giving the wrong answer to fit in with the group, even though they can see with their own 2 eyes. This demonstrates that conformity effect. There must be something wrong with my eyes. I need to get new glasses. But nobody gets out of their seat to measure the frickin' lines, which is what I tell my clients. Always look for how you can scientifically evaluate it. The Milgram obedience study, after World War II, the authoritarian personality was the dominant psychological frame for explaining the Germans. And Milgram, a child of Holocaust survivors, said, I'm not so sure, created a phony shock box, created a situation where healthy people were taught they're part of science, they're going to teach word pairs to memorize and have to give a shock when people make a mistake. And 2/3 do the equivalent of electrocuting another person because someone's wearing a white lab coat saying they have to finish the experiment. They made a commitment. So what these are saying is we need to understand us as a species, our vulnerabilities, and how we can fall into, and I'll mention the third, probably the most relevant, the Zimbardo prison study, where he took healthy kids, divided them in prisoners and guards, and they had to stop a 2-week experiment in 6 days because people were having nervous breakdowns and some of the guards were becoming sadistic. We can get into roles of us versus them and forget we're just students. We're just normal people. We're not our billy clubs or our chains around our ankles and such. And so, Michael, what I'm proposing is that we do a nationwide psychoeducation campaign to teach people how the mind works, how to tell the difference between ethical influence and unethical influence, explain psychological warfare and how to protect yourself, and use former members to message that, hey, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to realize, hey, I trusted the wrong person. I was married to a narcissist, for 20 years. And now I realize it's not me. I was gaslit for 20 years. I'm just talking, theoretically. But the point is that we need to have a vision of the future. We have America again, the United States.
Yeah. Well, look, when you're talking about how humans want to follow someone, I could understand that going back to prehistoric days, right? There was always one caveman who had to have been the leader. Why? Because he was the strongest, or
Right.
that he was the smartest and was able to bring the food back. So there's a benefit to being a follower. I don't understand the benefit that these folks see, especially when you see some of them after, say, for example, Trump's encouragement of the Stop the Steal movement, where you have these January 6th insurrectionists like Stephen Rhodes, who's doing 18 years for following, the cult of Trump right into the Capitol.
Yep.
I see it a little bit different. I see a big part of the Trump cult, their radical elements of the base that are disenfranchised people. They have gripes galore. They're all predominantly white for the most part. They have, this concept of white privilege that they're trying to protect, right? There's something more here that's going on. And I just wanted really to ask you, how do you see Trump's encouragement of these sort of roles, right, embolden that more radical element of the base?
So I see you asked me, so I'm going to tell you, this is my theory. And I'll just start this explanation by saying when the Soviet Union fell, I was invited to Moscow to teach my work to psychiatrists and psychologists because cults were pouring into Russia from the West. They want to understand the phenomenon. And so I was teaching to them my model based on Chinese communist brainwashing that was helpful in my deprogramming. And what the response was, the incredulity of Dr. Hassan, you're describing the whole system of pedagogy of the Soviet Union. Do you understand? We would turn dissidents into psychiatric facilities because they were criticizing the regime. So my point is when I was there, I realized it was a mind control cult. When you were a Soviet Union citizen, you had to speak the public party while you had private thoughts, this dual identity model. Vladimir Putin and people of Russia were raised in that. For them, that's normal. And when Vladimir Putin, KGB man, saw his mother Russia fall apart, he wanted to destroy America, and he wanted to pull Ukraine back and pull all of the countries that ceded from Mother Russia. So to answer your question, I think he wants to just destroy the United States of America, make us into a lot of little states where we don't have power in the world, where the dollar is not the dominant currency. So he can restore Mother Russia. So that's my frame for understanding the assault.
You see, I think, Stephen, I don't mean to interrupt you on this, but I don't see it as clearly as you do. I truly don't believe that Vladimir Putin wants to be Tsar Nicholas. He wants to reattach the entire former Soviet Union as as its ruler, as the Tsar. I see Vladimir Putin. I see Donald Trump. I see Mohammed bin Salman, Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping. Has nothing to do with their country, with nationalism, with love for their specific countries. It's all about the almighty dollar. It's all about making money off of the country. Every single one of them. I say bullshit. If Putin really cared about that, he wouldn't be throwing his oligarchs and people off the tops of buildings. Instead, he would be doing other things, using the money that he stole, like the $1 trillion that he's worth, take the money and use that money in order to benefit the country, in order to rebuild the country.
So I'll push back because we get to have differing opinions. So my take is that when you're a malignant narcissist, you have this frail ego. Number one is power. These people seek to have power. Money is number two and gives you more power. And sex is number three. And it's all related, but I'd say power. And I believe Putin wants world dominant power, doesn't want other people to have it. I know she has more power than he does.
I see it that they want the power in order to have the money. So I see power and money as the same exact thing.
Add the ego.
I know Donald better than anybody. And I can tell you, he loves the power. Loves the power. Loves the fact that he was flying around on Air Force One while you and I are paying for the gas and the pilot and so on. But it's the power
and the adulation he loves too.
Yes. But the power and the dollar are the same thing to him. They don't see the distinction. He wants. I agree with you that with power, you could anytime have the money, but Trump and I think Putin, I think they all see power and money as the same exact thing.
And I disagree. On a psychological level, I think what's motivating these people is a profound lack of love and self-love and self-worth. So they're overcompensating. They need people to wave and so kisses and they need that praise and admiration. And the thing that drives Donald crazy is when he's ignored or someone gets more attention.
And what's the first thing that Mohammed bin Salman did after he turned around and he showed his power, which is to have all of the royals brought to the Ritz-Carlton, put on the floor, and had them sign over vast amount of their wealth? What's the first thing that he did? The first thing he did is, I'm going to tell you. The first thing he did is he went out and he bought a home in France right next to the Louvre for $500 million, the most expensive house ever purchased in France. What's the second thing that he did right after that? He bought a boat for $500 million. But wait, there's more. This is like a bad Ginsu commercial. All right?
Yeah.
He then went out and he bought for $500 million art. He bought a painting for $500 million. That's why I turn around and I say, money and power and money to these people are all exactly the same. But let me just move on and ask you this, because this stays
Sure.
on the point.
Sure.
So what similarities then do you see between Trump's narrative of constantly being a victim, right? Remember, the victim of the witch hunt and so on, and the persecution complexes cultivated by leaders of destructive cults?
So I think it has to do with, and we've heard Trump messaging to this effect, getting his followers to identify with him. So if his followers feel like they've been victimized by the system and their leader is saying the same thing and saying, they're persecuting you, they're using me, but they're actually after you. There's this merging of sense of self and other. So I think it's more a strategy about appealing to the psychology, the emotional insecurities of his base.
Interesting.
That's my take.
Yeah. So then do me a favor then, as a follow-up, discuss with my listeners, how do you see the long-term dangers posed by Trump's ability to normalize political violence amongst his followers? I mean, as seen in their reactions to his legal battles and his public statements.
Yeah, and let's not forget Steve Bannon, Roger Stone, Alex Jones,
All part of the cult.
Michael Flynn, all messaging about needing to do a civil war and needing to do survival training and getting their assault rifles and all of that. It's very, very concerning. And again, it's about wanting to destroy the United States and induce a state of fear. By the way, a lot of what the messaging is emotional manipulation of fear, anger, distrust, and disgust, those negative emotions, which is very, very clear that you can get tired of hate. In fact, I have a friend who was a white supremacist. He had a band. He was recruiting people. He said he got tired of the hate. And he responded when an African-American woman at McDonald's smiled at him and was kind to him, or his Jewish employer gave him half a sandwich when he saw that he hadn't had food. This got him out of this extremist, hate-filled, mentality. In the long run, you burn out because of people like affection. They like friendship. They like love. They like hugs and not just hatred and that.
I don't know. I would love to see that coming out of Trump's camp. But then, look, what we see is a very, very coordinated cultivation by Trump of his personal brand, right? It's always about Trump this, Trump that. He talks about himself in third person.
Yeah.
What he's doing, and always has, is he's taken his personal brand and he's making it inseparable from his political identity. So my question to you is, how does this contribute to the cultish loyalty that he's managed to engender from his followers? It's almost like they become part of the family. They become part of the brand.
You named it. It's the pseudo cult self. I became a small Sun Myung Moon. His followers want to be they want to be Trumps, and they identify with Trump. You saw the bandages on the ears that some of the people were having. This is stuff that I've been studying for decades with other cult leaders. It's very stereotypical. But what we want to come back to is values. And I'm not sure if I answered your last question enough to just say Trump had a very deleterious effect on people's sense of morality and decency and civility, and more violence, road rage, and other things like that happened because he was modeling it, because he's in a position to influence people. And for me, I'm focusing on wanting to bring people back to realizing we're on one planet, people. We are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper, and we really need to care about each other and think long term on planetary survival, and not this petty hating each other and wanting to cause distress and break things down.
Right, but you were talking about like one item wearing the tampon on his right ear after getting shot. I'm going to take that a little bit further. Talk about how stupid. And again, I have no choice but to call them stupid, because the expression from Forrest Gump, "Stupid is as stupid does." You remember that? You remember that line?
Absolutely. I thought he was a genius, of course.
Beyond a genius, exactly. However,
right.
Here's the interesting thing. At Trump rallies, you have swaths of people who show up wearing diapers. Trump diapers that they buy. I don't even know how much that they cost. And T-shirts that go along with the diapers that say, "Real men wear diapers." Because there was an argument that Trump was now wearing
incontinent.
Right, that he's wearing adult diapers. And so real men wear diapers. And they're actually going to these rallies wearing diapers. How do you make sense of anything that ridiculous and that stupid?
I actually, if I'm going to be honest, I thought this was the left infiltrating to make the right look stupider. That was my initial response, because it was not something that makes sense would be done by true believers to laud the Herculean, the Superman costumes. That makes sense to me, but the diapers never made sense to me. Sorry. That's what I thought.
But it's not. It's not the left. These are true MAGA supporters that they don't
I'd
care.
have to interview them. I'd be fascinated, frankly, to interview, random sampling of people who showed up like that. Maybe they were given $100 to do that, because we know that he pays people to show up and do things. But, anybody who thinks they know with a capital KNOW, is lying, because we're not God. We don't know everything. We can make good predictions based on evidence and facts and studying a phenomenon. But I want to state categorically that with the now Democratic convention, Kamala Harris and Walz, I think people are more open now to actually, for example, reading the Cult of Trump book. Even though it's a few years old, it's still completely accurate and validated. In fact, George Conway kindly offered to write the foreword on
the best
re-release.
Yeah,
and I'll just say, George has the anti-psychopath pack, and he's saying the media has not told the public the truth, the mental illness of these people with this malignant narcissistic. So he's going out there, and I'm a mental health professional, Bandy Lee is. We want the public to understand we've studied this stuff. So we can make accurate predictions.
Okay, well then you bring up an important word, which is mental health. Let me ask you this question then.
Sure.
How do the constant cycles of outrage and grievance that's perpetuated by Trump day in and day out, hour by hour, minute by minute, second by second, how does that continuous constant cycle impact the mental health and group cohesion of his MAGA supporters?
So it's very important point, and the constant reinforcement of these beliefs and these attitudes keeps one locked into the bubble I can tell you when I had my near fatal van crash due to sleep exhaustion and I was in the hospital away from the constant re-indoctrination, I was just lying in a bed in pain for 2 weeks. The real me started surfacing again. I started thinking again because it wasn't constantly, my brain wasn't bathed in the propaganda. That said, I really think the media is doing a major disservice to the public by not by repeating the lies and look at the latest lie, because that puts it back in people's heads, but rather focus on the messaging that needs to be done that will help improve society, bring us back to civility, back to problem solving and helping each other. And that's what I'm appealing to here, and just encouraging people to start thinking the cure to this insanity is sanity, and reminding us, like, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Don't call names to people who are in the cult of Trump. If you've cut them off and called them bad names and they're relatives of yours or friends, I say reach out to them. Say, I miss you. How are you? I came across a photo when we were fishing together as kids. Can we agree to be in each other's lives again? We cannot talk politics, but we want to create warm connections to people outside of the bubble, because then they'll start thinking again.
So, I'm trying to reach these MAGA followers, and I try to do it whether it's through this podcast, I have a YouTube channel now, The Michael Cohen Show.
Cool.
I have a TikTok show that I do every night just because I can't sleep. So I just jump on and I'll stay on until I get tired. Sometimes like 2 hours, 2.5 hours I'll go. And there's always a lot of MAGA trolls that are on there. And you cannot get through to them. So I find it, I agree with you. Yeah, it's easier to be nice than it is to be abusive or hurtful and so on. But these people know only one way. And
you sure they're not bots?
I'm pretty sure some of them are not bots. Not when you have like 8, 9, 10,000 followers. You don't see with too many bots. But these are real people, and they are, even if it's just one. Just let's agree that maybe out of the 50, at least one of them are real, and they don't want peace with you. They want you in the cult of Donald J. Trump, or they want you dead. It's that simple.
Right. So, first of all, I care about you. I admire you. Offline, let's talk about sleep, because we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And if
I'm lucky if I get 4.
So let's talk, friend to friends. But what I want to say is that I believe that I could probably teach you some of the Steve Hassan exit counseling expert techniques, where by asking questions, or in your case, if they're challenging you, challenge them.
I do.
To actually read the Cult of Trump book.
But I
and
do.
Line by line, find anything that's not correct.
They don't read. They don't want to read. They have a belief system, and anything that contradicts that belief system, they tune out, and then they come in with the hatred. So I made a statement, and they turned around and they said, that's a lie. So I said, I want everybody right now, and there must have been 30, 40,000 people following it at the time. It was big. And they turned around and I said, I want everybody to Google the following words. And this one happened to do with Kamala Harris, and it happened to do with Israel. Where Kamala Harris made a statement that her commitment to Israel is ironclad. And the first article that pops up is Reuters, which is a relatively nonpartisan paper. You could turn around and say, the New York Post, obviously partisan one way. New York Times, some people say go the other way. But Reuters, I think, like the AP, is somewhere more in the middle.
I think AP is a little more strict, but anyway, continue.
My point being, not interested in doing it. That would make no difference to me. Even if they say that they quoting it from her, and there's 100 more articles, including from their own specific sources, news sources, that they get their information, they don't give a shit. They don't want to hear about it, not interested, not true, and so on. So
right.
These are
so
the
let
problems.
me tell you, as a former Moonie, I was not allowed to have a negative thought about Moon, the divine principle, about the policies of the group. I was trained to do thought stopping, chanting, humming. There were a number of techniques, and I was given a phobia that if I questioned the group, demons would attack me, and I would be possessed. And so what happens when people, if you talk to me when I was a true believer in the Moonies, and you said, go check out, Moon was, involved with the Korean CIA, I would be chanting in my head and saying, you're Satan, you, Michael Cohen, are Satan trying to take me away from God, in my head as a Moonie. That's a subjective experience of someone in a mind control cult. I don't know the specific people there, but I think we could ask somebody who's left recently what was going on in your mind. But I can tell you that even though they may say I don't give a damn, they may be actually questioning underneath. And so the issue for me is always, I hear you. You don't trust yourself to look at that article, to look at the facts right now, but you may change your mind one day. And at that point, then you'll be in a position as an adult to know what's real and what's true. Just that open-ended kind of messaging is what I recommend that people do.
Yeah, I hate to say it, I think that type of messaging, especially with these folks, fall on deaf ears, because I think many of them have so much hate and anger in their hearts and so on, that they found somebody who gives them the ability to embrace their hatred, their animus, whether it's racial, whether it's misogyny, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. It just allows it, to go on. But let me ask you this.
You may be right. You may be right, and they may be showing off for their pals who are on the same show. But
so the question I want to ask you on that is, how do you think that Trump's frequent use, and it's getting worse, as he sees himself losing and falling in popularity and watching the momentum of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, his frequent use of hyperbolic threats like civil war or national decline if he's not elected, how does all of this serve to radicalize his base and to prepare them for extreme actions? Because he wants that.
Yeah, I really do agree with you on that, and in technical terms, as a mental health professional, he's decompensating, meaning his psychopathology is getting worse and worse, and he's not going to get healthier as time goes on. It's going to be more and more extreme. And what I'm hoping is that more and more people who have loved ones who have been trapped in QAnon and in the cult of Trump start just that warm, open door, miss you, love you, let's talk, instead of you dumb schmuck, how come you're still there? Can't you see? Get rid of the persuasion through facts thing and be warm, and then ask questions in a way that makes people go inside and connect with their doubts. Because I do believe people have a lot of doubts about this. And like I said before, I want to destigmatize that people can leave and not have everybody say, how could you be so stupid that you believe this stuff? And when I hear you, Michael, say, well, I say it to myself that I was stupid. by being in the cult of Trump. I want to be like, Michael, please, like, be kind to yourself. You were doing the best you could under the circumstances with the information and experiences you had. Understand the mind can get hacked and we can grow out and reconnect with our values and our family.
Yeah, except,
right? So be kinder to yourself.
Yeah, except here's the problem that I see. And, the hour goes by so quick here, and I have a million more questions running around in my head. But
I'm going to invite you back to my podcast, The Influence.
Listen, anytime, Stephen. But here's sort of the thing that I was talking about, right? What MAGA provides, what Donald Trump is providing to these MAGA morons, as I like to refer to them, is a sense of community and belonging. And what he does with the language that I was talking about before, the gaslighting, the election denials, the J6 insurrectionists, the hostages, I'm the victim, and so on. What this language does, what he is doing, is reinforcing their loyalty to him, even when they are faced with contradictory evidence that they refuse to acknowledge. Like what you were just saying, you weren't allowed to have negative thoughts about Moon.
Right.
That's a little different here. They're somehow not told that they cannot have negative thoughts about Trump. They've chosen that themselves, which I think makes Donald even more dangerous as a cult leader than Moon.
So I'm going to challenge the idea that people have genuine community when they're in a mind control cult. I know that they believe they do, but what people quickly understand that the minute they start verbalizing doubts or questions, they're ostracized, they're condemned, and they're attacked. And we see that with David Weissman, one of the first MAGA trolls who left. Everybody turned on him. And when you're in a mind control cult, through example, that if you start questioning, everyone's going to turn on you and hate you. So in a sense, the pseudo community turns into actually you're being controlled by fear that everyone's going to turn on you. So people learn in their cult identity to self-censor. They understand the rules. But again, it's a matter of realizing there's more ex-members who've left cults than people who are in cults today. But a lot of people have left and they're ashamed to tell their story. Oh, I was in this group. I was in that group. But the more, and that's why we see so many documentaries now being done on cults and podcasts, because there's so many people who've been impacted, and there's value in listening to other people's stories. And when you're in a cult, you may not react positively to criticisms against your leader, doctrine, or group, but you'll look at Scientology or the Moonies or Chinese communists or pimps and traffickers, and you'll probably be open to learning about that mind control. And it's the same mind control: behavior, information, thought, and emotional control variables, as it's on my Freedom of Mind website.
Well, my recommendation is that the DNC purchase a copy of The Cult of Trump by Stephen Hassan and send it to every single MAGA and every single person that has made a donation to Trump's campaign. They should send them this book and make it required reading, because I think it's about the only way that we're going to end up deprogramming people to get the hell out of this cult before our Democratic
I love you for that endorsement, and I would disagree with you. What they should do is buy copies and give it to all family members who have someone in the cult of Trump. They need to read it first. Because if you're just handing a book that with a red cap on it that says The Cult of Trump, they're not gonna read it.
Wow.
But if family and friends read it, then they'll know how to talk to their friends and loved ones, and we can turn this around in a very constructive way.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. We're in a really weird place in this country, but I thank you for helping to put some perspective on what we need to do to bring back some normalcy to this country.
Thank you, Michael. Again, thank you. I really admire you. I thank you for being a stand-up guy. And I really hope more people will read Revenge, because it's really important to understand how Trump manipulated our system of justice to attack a whistleblower, former cult member who spoke up.
Well, thank you, my friend, and I will see you soon.
Thank you.